Stop running from your triggers. They're the gateway to everything you want to manifest. Most people believe being triggered means something has gone wrong, that a reaction is a sign of weakness or failure, that something needs to be avoided, fixed, or buried. But here's the twist. What if that trigger isn't the problem at all? What if the very thing that feels most uncomfortable is the gateway to everything that's been asked for? The truth is, every trigger is a mirror. And that mirror isn't reflecting flaws or mistakes. It's revealing identity. It's showing the exact place where the old self is crumbling and the new self is trying to break through. It's not about staying calm all the time or forcing fake positivity. It's about seeing, finally, that the moments which feel the most painful are actually proof of movement, proof that a shift is happening. The identity that once accepted less, settled, doubted, or begged is dissolving. And that inner discomfort is not a signal to turn back. It's a sign to go deeper. Because this isn't about controlling outcomes anymore. This is about becoming the version of self that no longer gets shaken by what once caused fear. The trigger isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's common to believe that being triggered means something is wrong, that it's a sign of failure or weakness. But what if that's the biggest lie keeping people stuck? What if the trigger isn't the problem, but the invitation? Most of the world has been taught to run from discomfort, to hide from strong emotions, to shut down the moment something stings. But in doing that, the most important opportunities for growth are missed. A trigger is never random. It's precise. It shows exactly where the current self-concept still holds fear, shame, or a limiting belief. It doesn't come to punish, it comes to wake something up. When a strong reaction comes out of nowhere, when something or someone touches a nerve, it's not just about what's happening in the moment. It's often about the old story that's still living underneath the surface. Maybe it's the belief that love has to be earned, or that safety isn't available, or that no matter how hard someone tries, they'll never be chosen. Those stories didn't start yesterday. They've been running in the background for years, shaping how life feels, how people react, and what they believe they're worthy of. A trigger simply brings that story into the light. And that's not something to fear, that's something to work with. Because once the story is seen, it can be questioned, it can be shifted, it can be replaced with something that feels more true, more loving, more powerful. But none of that can happen if the trigger is avoided. So instead of asking, why is this happening to me? A better question is, what is this showing me about how I see myself? That question alone can open the door to massive transformation. It slows everything down. It creates space, and in that space, a new version of self can emerge, one that doesn't panic or shrink when discomfort shows up, but instead recognizes it as a signal that the old self is being stretched. Triggers aren't blocks, they're bridges. They connect the present moment to the deeper wounds that are still asking for attention. And if those wounds are met with honesty instead of judgment, everything starts to shift. Not because the outside world changed, but because the inside world finally allowed something new to be true. Most people are quick to blame the outer world for their pain. It's easy to point to someone else's behavior, a situation that feels unfair, or a moment that didn't go the way it was supposed to. But what if the world isn't doing anything to anyone? What if it's showing something? Every experience, especially the uncomfortable ones, is a mirror. And that mirror isn't trying to punish. It's trying to reflect back the story that's been playing beneath the surface, the one about not being enough, not being seen, not being chosen, not being safe to relax into love, into worth, into trust. The outer world is always responding to the state of being that's held within. Not just the thoughts, not just the affirmations, but the deeper identity, the version of self that's being lived from moment by moment. That's why changing circumstances isn't the solution. Because if the same self-concept is still active, the same patterns will find their way back in new forms. That's not punishment, it's precision. The mirror never lies. It doesn't exaggerate. It just reflects. It takes real courage to stop running from that mirror. Because sometimes what it shows doesn't feel good. But discomfort isn't danger. It's data. It's guidance. It's feedback from the inner world saying, this part of you still believes the old story. And that's powerful to know. Because once that part is seen, it can be healed. The mirror doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be read. It's not about getting the world to stop triggering you. It's about learning how to interpret what the trigger is pointing to inside. That's where power starts to build. Because the moment something outside no longer has control over how you feel inside, freedom begins to rise. Not because life became perfect, but because awareness stepped in, presence stepped in, choice stepped in. The game changes when there's no more blame. When the question stops being, why are they doing this to me? And starts being, what belief is this moment mirroring back to me? That one shift changes everything. Because now the power is back where it always belonged. Not in controlling the outer world, but in choosing who you're being in response to it. The mirror isn't against you. It's showing you what's still alive in your self-concept. And that's a gift, because you can't change what you won't look at. There's a belief that floats around the manifestation world. The idea that if you're still feeling triggered, if you still get emotional, if you still struggle with doubt or insecurity, then you're doing something wrong. That belief is heavy, and it creates pressure to pretend that everything is fine when inside, things are unraveling. But real transformation doesn't come from bypassing emotions. It comes from being honest with them. Feeling doesn't mean failing. In fact, the ability to feel fully is often a sign that something deeper is finally ready to move. The old self learned to survive by pushing things down, by staying strong, by brushing it off. But strength isn't in the suppression, it's in the willingness to stay present when things rise up. That's how healing happens, not by fixing yourself, but by giving yourself permission to feel without judgment. Emotions aren't blocks, they're messengers. And if they're ignored, they get louder. But if they're welcomed, they soften. No one ever changed their self-concept by shaming themselves for being human. The version of you that's still learning, still tender, still healing, that version doesn't need to be pushed away. It needs to be held. The idea that high vibration means constant happiness is a misunderstanding. True alignment doesn't mean never feeling pain. It means not identifying with it. It means noticing it, honoring it, and choosing again from a place of deeper awareness. So if something hurts, it's okay to let it hurt. If a trigger brings tears, it's okay to cry. That's not a breakdown. That's a release. That's energy moving. That's the old identity loosening its grip. You're not starting over every time something uncomfortable shows up. You're peeling back another layer. You're getting closer to the core of who you really are underneath all the conditioning. This work isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming real. And real means you feel. Real means you're honest. Real means you don't shame yourself when an old story rises, because you now know that it's rising to be healed. And healing is never linear. Sometimes things get messier before they get clearer. That's not failure, that's recalibration. So if the wave hits, let it. If the voice of doubt comes up, listen to what it's trying to protect. And then remind yourself that growth is not about avoiding emotion. It's about becoming someone who knows how to sit with it and choose love anyway. Every time something stings, every time there's a sharp emotional reaction, it's not random, it's a signal. And that signal points straight back to the version of self that's still active in the background, quietly shaping how life is experienced. Most people walk around reacting from their past without even realizing it. A trigger doesn't create a wound, it reveals one. It points to the old identity, the one formed through survival, through rejection, through moments of not feeling seen, heard, or loved. That identity learned certain beliefs in order to stay safe, but now it's outdated, and the trigger is what brings it into the light. It could be something small, a comment, a delay, a moment of silence, and suddenly, the nervous system flares up. But that's not just about what's happening now. It's about what used to happen back then. Maybe back then, silence meant abandonment. Maybe a delayed reply meant rejection. Maybe being ignored meant, I'm not enough. So the current moment wakes up that old version of self, and before you even have time to think, you're reacting from fear, from pain, from that wounded place that still hasn't been fully seen. This is why triggers are so valuable, because they map out the identity that's running the show. They show where the self-concept still needs to evolve. You don't need to analyze your whole life to know where you're stuck, just look at what triggers you. Look at what shakes your peace, what makes you chase, what makes you shut down. That's the map. And once it's visible, you don't have to keep living from it, because the truth is, you're not that old version anymore. You're not the person who had to beg for love or hide your truth to feel accepted. But those patterns might still be wired into your nervous system, still living in your self-concept, still shaping your assumptions about who you are and what you deserve. And that's okay, because now you see it. And once it's seen, it can be shifted. When a trigger shows up, ask yourself, who do I become in this moment? What identity is being activated? And then ask, who do I actually want to be right now? That's the bridge. That's the practice. That's where the shift happens, not by forcing the old identity to disappear, but by noticing it, thanking it for what it tried to protect, and then choosing again from a place that feels more true. There's a split-second moment between being triggered and how you respond to it. And in that moment, there's a choice to either fall into the automatic reaction of the old self or to pause and step into something new. That pause is everything. It's the place where change actually begins. Because if you don't catch that moment, the body takes over. The old identity kicks in. The nervous system fires off like it used to. The story plays out again. Not because it's still true, but because it's still familiar. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it's your future. That automatic reaction isn't destiny. It's just habit. And habits can be changed. This is where revision becomes more than a technique. It becomes a lifestyle. It's not about rewriting the past so you can pretend things didn't happen. It's about choosing to see that those past moments don't define who you are anymore. And the trigger is what tells you where that revision is still needed. When a situation pulls you back into fear, that's your moment to revise. When something makes you feel abandoned or not enough or powerless, that's your moment to decide again. Not by fighting the feeling, not by forcing yourself to be positive, but by gently reminding yourself that the version of you reacting is not the version of you that's in charge anymore. You get to rewrite that scene, not just in memory, but in energy, in presence, in the way you show up now. Revision means meeting the trigger with curiosity instead of judgment. It means saying, there's that old belief again, the one that says I have to be perfect to be loved, the one that says I'm invisible if I'm not needed, the one that says I'm not allowed to relax into being enough. And instead of letting that belief drive your next move, you pause, you breathe, you anchor into the truth that's trying to be born through you, the truth that says you're already worthy, already safe, already chosen by something far deeper than circumstance. This is how identity changes, not through force, but through repeated moments of choosing something higher. And the more you choose the new self, the more the old one fades, not because you fought it, but because you stopped feeding it. So the next time a trigger shows up, remember, it's not here to break you. It's here to build the bridge between who you've been and who you're becoming. When the trigger is no longer seen as the enemy but as the teacher, everything changes. The discomfort that once felt unbearable starts to become a powerful signal, a guide pointing to the exact place where growth is waiting. That shift in perspective isn't always easy. It asks for patience, kindness, and a willingness to lean into the unknown parts of yourself. But it's the key to stepping into true freedom, because triggers aren't random attacks, they're lessons disguised as moments of pain. The truth is, the journey of transformation is never smooth. It's not about arriving at a place where triggers disappear, but about becoming someone who can meet triggers with grace and curiosity. When this happens, triggers lose their power to control how life feels. They become invitations to deepen awareness and expand the self-concept. This is where manifestation becomes effortless, not because life suddenly becomes perfect, but because the inner world becomes unshakable. Every time there's an emotional reaction, there's an opportunity to pause and ask, what is this showing me about how I'm seeing myself right now? That question turns the spotlight inward and invites healing. It rewires the nervous system to respond with presence rather than panic. Over time, this rewiring builds resilience, a resilience rooted not in armor or avoidance, but in authentic self-acceptance and strength. The more triggers are met with this kind of attention, the more the old stories lose their grip. The wounds that once caused pain begin to soften. The patterns that repeated become quieter. And in this space, a new way of being emerges, one where confidence isn't built on external validation, but from a deep knowing of worth that no trigger can shake. This process isn't about rushing or forcing change. It's about showing up again and again, ready to learn, ready to grow, ready to expand. It's about making friends with discomfort instead of running from it, because every trigger carries the code to unlock a higher version of self. The more triggers are embraced, the more the self-concept upgrades. And that's how the mirror becomes the most powerful ally on the journey, reflecting not just the past, but the infinite potential waiting to be realized. So instead of avoiding triggers, welcome them. Slow down, look closer, listen deeply, and watch as the old wounds transform into stepping stones toward the freedom and love that have been waiting all along. So instead of avoiding triggers, welcome them. Slow down, look closer, listen deeply, then drop a comment below about a trigger that's been showing up for you and what it's teaching you. I will meet you with another golden nugget. Happy manifesting.